listeners, and welcome to another episode of Subscriptions Scaled. I'm your host, Nick Fredrick. Today, here with me is Kimberly Moore. She is the CEO of Go Together, Inc. out of Washington, D.C. Kimberly, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Looking forward to it.
Great. Well, let's kind of dive in here by talking a little bit about yourself, your background, your company, and how you got into this.
Yeah, so I'm CEO and co-founder of Go Together. And think about it this way. Do you have kids?
Yes, two small ones.
Okay. So for parents today who are trying to organize how their kids get to and from school, most people think it's a bus, but actually more parents drive their kids to school. So what we're doing here at Go Together is building a go-to platform for schools and school districts to point their parents to organize that transportation. So today it looks like carpooling, walking, biking, taking transit together, but in the future it could be signing up for your school bus. It could be booking a trip through to one of the emerging Uber for Kids companies that are out there, Hop, Skip, Drive, and Zoom. So our play is really, the future is multi-mode, and it's convenient, and it's also equitable. And that's where we fit in. Our product to get us there is Carpool to School, which is currently available in 49 schools across the country. And we really pride ourselves in being the future of transportation for those schools that are also using or considering public transit as another option. So how did I get into this? Wow. Well, things happen in weird ways when you're a startup founder. You hear an idea and you're thinking, I think I could solve that probably. So two stories. One is my sister is a sales executive now with Gardner, then had a teenage daughter in a private high school, and also was a competitive dancer. And she's a single mom trying to juggle all the balls. And the school didn't have transportation. So every week she's trying to figure out how to get my niece to and from. And like a lot of parents who have to make it happen, she made it happen. And except for 1 week where she was really jammed, she asked me, could I help? I had no idea that it was a problem. So in that conversation, she shared with me the struggle of parents, particularly that afternoon pickup where you're at work, kids got to go someplace other than maybe home, and it's only 15, 20 minutes from where you need to go, but you've got to come all the way back to the school, pick them up, drop them off for them to be gone for the next 2 hours. So I was looking for a side hustle at the time. I was an event producer. I have a logistics background with that, production and logistics, and also started the federal government sales division for Verizon Wireless. So I had this unique experience of taking what would be, retail type wireless services and put them in a specialized, wireless application. And so I'm sitting here thinking, she goes, I think you could make some money doing this. And I was like, okay, that sounds good. And I think in technology. And so in about a week and a half, I put together a website, a scheduling tool, a payment tool, a tracker, and said, hey, what do you think? And she was like, wow, this is way more than what I thought you were going to share with me. So that's kind of how I got started. That's like the practical reason. But the real reason is I made 2 decisions in life. And one of them was not to live in regret. And the second one was based on a talk I heard a guy do, where the title was, opportunities of a lifetime must be seized in the lifetime of the opportunity. So as I was discovering this problem, I was sitting there going, now, I think I could see how to make this work, but should I want to leave the work that I'm doing that I love to go do this? And I just heard both of those 2 things. Will I regret this? Is this a lifetime opportunity that I must seize now? That is the real reason why I said yes to starting Go Together. So we're 6 years in, And we started off in a way very different from many companies. We actually started off with the acquisition of Carpool to School. I had run the play of this Uber for Kids model for about 12 months. And during that time, my whole idea was to figure out, how do you make this work? How do you get parents to agree to let their kids ride with other kids that they don't know? So I was looking for some software to maybe do that, thinking I could find some open source software. Uber was around, so I was thinking there's people who are thinking about these things. And I landed in a conversation with the founder of Carpool to School at the exact moment that she wanted to sell her company.
Mm.
And she'd been talking to a couple of different firms before me, but I think we were just aligned on why this is such an important thing for families. And then I got the why it was such an important thing for schools. So we started with an acquisition, closed that deal in 90 days with the help of my co-founder now and another advisor, and saw pretty quickly that it made a lot more sense from a business perspective to pivot completely to this software play,
Okay.
where schools were our customers. That represents a sustainable long-term revenue, and we would have the ability to scale faster. Discovered pretty quickly in the pilot of my Uber for Kids model that it's an expensive business to run.
Okay.
Uber definitely has told us that. It costs a lot to market to consumers. It would cost a lot more to vet and build the supply side of drivers who
Mhm.
would commit to a regular scheduled pickup for kids, which is not what you do with Uber. You sign in and out when you want to.
Sure.
And so this just made it seem like it was the right choice. And so since we had that acquisition, we've come to discover a lot of what's happening in school transportation. We're offering as a country a 21st century education option choices out there, from magnet schools to charter schools to all kinds of different options for education. And we have this 20th century transportation system in place to get kids there.
Mm.
And what students and families know is that, it's hard to get kids up in the morning. This to go to
Oh my
school.
gosh, do I ever?
And it's even harder when the school system requires your child to get up earlier because they don't have enough bus drivers to do the routes. And the routes are now going to be longer. So your kid could be coming home later, tired on the bus for 45 minutes. And parents just weren't having any of that.
Yeah.
And so the numbers and parents have spoken. 54% actually drive their kids to school. And allow 13% to walk or take public transportation. So school transportation is a $24 billion industry, only transporting 33% of all students.
Wow. Wow.
So we feel like we've come in at the right time,
Mm.
that lifetime opportunity, to really change the way people think about it. And at the same time, for schools and school districts, reduce their per pupil transportation costs at least by 60%, because we're offering these other options that make sense, better sense for families, and also is offloading some of the inefficiency of the current school bus system.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about 54% of parents driving their kids to school. I wonder how many of them are dropping off one kid or just two, or
Oh,
having to go to multiple schools, right?
absolutely, absolutely. I'm sure that really is a one-child situation for the most part.
Mhm.
And this was before COVID, right? So
Right.
now that we are in COVID and will be in some form of COVID at least for 2 years at least,
Mhm.
um, parents are less likely to put their kids on a school bus and more likely to create sort of a COVID pod of transportation. And that's where we come in.
Okay. So talk a little bit about how you acquire customers. So it sounds like you partner through schools. That's kind of
Mhm.
your starting point, and
Yeah.
then get the parents on board. I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, so we do have an annual subscription that schools subscribe to based on enrollment. And so we typically interface with the head of school or principal and a school operations director or the admissions director. Because here's the thing, transportation is the number 3 reason why a parent chooses or doesn't choose a school or an after school activity. And so if a school cannot communicate how their child can get to that school, especially if they're cutting a check for it, they lose revenue. And the same is true with charter schools where they are paid by the state on a per pupil basis. If you don't meet your targets for enrollment, you will not get that funding. And so transportation, the gap has to be closed. And that's why schools are looking, particularly those that are not in public school districts, are looking for other options. So the school, we receive a lot of inbound traffic for carpool to school, and we do email marketing, targeted email marketing to reach customers. So they'll get a demo and really talk about how would this work well in their school. If it's new, it typically takes the first year of the subscription to really see how it's going to work. So once they subscribe, we do an onboarding process that can take anywhere from, we can, of course, with technology, we can have you up and running within hours, but it won't be effective unless it's rolled out properly.
Sure.
And so that process takes about 2 weeks, and really that long because there's multiple players who are involved in terms of scheduling. We need to be in connection with the social media manager, website, person who's actually going to be approving parents. So here's how it works. Once the school is on board, the school vets every parent or student driver who's going to be using our application, using a system that they use, or we use a background screening platform as well. Once the parents get access because they've been approved by their school or district, it's up to them at that point. And the school really is only acting as a communicator in case of changes in the school schedule. They can send out announcements on that platform. They have visibility to the number of pools that are created and when they're created. But for the most part, it's in the parents' hands. And the schools really have limited interaction in how parents get connected.
Gotcha. So ultimately, the drivers here, I guess, end customer is the parents and the students that they're taking. So engagement from them, I guess, is key, right, to it being effective. And
it is key. And so it's still the nut to crack. If you look at anyone who is doing B2B carpooling, enterprise carpooling, it is the holy grail to figure out how you get people who don't have to carpool with other people to want to carpool. And then even when they do, how do you make it so that, it works for everybody, right? Especially in the DC area, we've got these express lanes that require a certain number of people. And so if you have a regular rider, you can use those express lanes. But what if that person doesn't come that particular week, that you can't use the express lane? And, so building in those incentives to get people to agree to carpool is a big opportunity in addition to being a challenge.
Sure. I guess if you look at, I guess the subscription itself that you're selling is to the school, and then renewal is really dependent upon the engagement of the community around that school, or the school's community and parents to get engaged, and them to get the value on it to want to renew that for years to come.
Exactly. So we spend time with the school really trying to understand their school community. And we also have to push really hard on the fact that this is technology, right? And depending on how much technology you're putting in front of your parents, you're going to have high visibility. So one, they've got to remember, I do have this as an option, because if they only see it at the rollout, you know how busy your life is as a parent. You've got to see it multiple places in order to be reminded, especially if your child wants to do after school activities and your natural instinct would be no. But if you remembered that you had carpool to school, you could consider it now, because maybe Johnny down the street also is doing basketball and you could carpool with them.
Definitely.
Mhm.
So do you play with any incentives, any gamification, anything like that to get parents involved and want to, continue using it?
Yeah, so the incentives that we've worked with the schools on, we don't offer any incentives like cash or any rebates or anything like that. But what we do talk to the school about is if they've got a volunteer requirement for parents, that they could use this as a way for parents to get those volunteer hours completed,
Hmm.
right? Carpooling. We also have a school that it uses our platform to issue parking passes to their junior and seniors, so that because they don't have any more space for kids to park and they're parking all over everywhere.
Sure.
But if you carpool, you get a premium spot
Hmm.
for parking.
Oh,
So that's another incentive that we've been able to work out with another school. The other is being able to get in the pickup and drop off line further ahead, right?
hmm.
So if they
Hmm.
have the space to do 2 lanes, if you carpool, you get in 1 lane, but if you don't carpool, you're going to be in the longer
On the
line.
end of the line.
So that's an incentive. So
Mhm.
those are the three that we've seen that really work. There are some that the school could potentially offer that, we haven't seen too many of people do this, but providing some level of gas incentive for
Okay.
people. We've considered adding like Venmo or a Cash App to our platform
Hmm.
to make it easier for parents to exchange that cash. Um, but it's something that we're constantly working on, trying to figure out what are the levers that we need to pull
Sure.
for success.
Yeah. Is that one of them? So when a parent might be the one who just, as part of their carpool, says, "I'll be the one to take them to school all week," other parents might financially compensate them in some way. That
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That definitely happens offline.
okay.
Anyway, we were trying to think about how do we bring that online. So here's the catch. Let's say in Connecticut, if you're carpooling and you have an exchange of cash, you can violate your personal liability insurance.
Hmm.
So when
Wow.
we ran into that situation, we kind of backed off of the idea because now it makes us to be, an expert in car insurance in 50 states.
Right.
It's not something we're interested in doing. But we did, bring it up to schools who think about that as a way to, and encourage parents to work together. But we just felt like we couldn't add it to the app and take on that risk until we could do it in a way that made sense.
Yeah. Okay. So you touched on this a little bit ago. Certainly, COVID has had an impact in terms of parents might be apprehensive about putting a whole bunch of kids on a bus or just being around people that maybe aren't in their circle. How have you seen that impact your business and scaling over the past year?
Yeah, so schools, as you have seen in the news, have really gone from completely virtual. So let's try now being in person. The numbers go up and they've got to go back to virtual. And so I think this spring is going to be really the first time that we get to see what the impact is. We did lose schools last year on our platform, as you might imagine,
Okay.
but we also gained schools on our platform. And a lot of private schools are still in session right now. One of the surveys from EdChoice indicated that over 55% of parents want their kids in person in school, if
Mhm.
at all possible. And I think what they've seen at the end of the last school year and definitely in the fall is the social and emotional learning is lost for younger students. And so not having the engagement was a problem. So you saw a lot of private schools and public charters, and even some public schools try to do in-person learning.
Mhm.
But the COVID numbers are really driving them up. So I think with the vaccine now being um, distributed across the country, we're going to see more districts offer in-person school. We're in DC and Fairfax County announced that they would not be in person until they had a sufficient amount of teachers and staff who've been vaccinated. So they'll be virtual, and they're like the second largest school system in the country. So we're just paying attention. We were part of Safe Routes to Schools Return to School Working Group, so that we could hear what the country was doing around school policies. And so that's what we know today. We're preparing for that massive return to school by beefing up our marketing, and also we have an idea to do something on the front end of our app to make it easier for parents to just confirm that their child doesn't have COVID and that they agree to provide a safe environment for carpooling.
Sure. Have you had to change your technology and your platform or your app in any way to handle the effects of COVID? So things like what you were just talking about?
Yeah, so that's what we're working on right now in preparation for the return to school, is to be able to give parents that assurance that there's agreement between families of what a safe carpool looks like, COVID carpool looks like.
Gotcha. Okay. So since you're the customer that you ultimately sell and bill to are the schools around the country, I assume public and private, or kind of a combination there. How do you market to them? Like, how do you market to new subscribers and acquire them? And what channels do you use? What's been effective for you? So
Targeted email has been the most effective for us. We recently, during COVID, really just launched a really good content game on our website, and we've actually launched a podcast where we can take the conversation that we're having on the web into a podcast and invite subject matter experts around our topics, so that we can let schools and districts know that we are interested in the whole problem that's happening in education, not just our part. And so between our content marketing, our email marketing, we have made some significant contacts with schools. I think the next level for us is to do some LinkedIn targeted, I wouldn't call it marketing, it's going to be really email. Okay. Most school district leaders are incredibly busy right now. And we don't want to just be noise in their email. Sure. We want to really deliver value. So we're looking for schools that are already using another mode of transportation like public transit, because we can help them have their students get organized around taking that transit together. So maybe their parents drop them off at a central location and they ride that bus together or take the metro together. So that's what we're doing now. We're talking to others about how we can increase the top of the funnel, the lead generation that makes sense for selling to schools.
Gotcha. Would you say that the product itself and the one that you sell to the school, is that custom every time? Do you look at like the size of the school and the number of parents, or it has a pretty straightforward, rate card, if you will, I guess, that associated with it?
Yeah. So for the most part, it's standard.
Okay.
Obviously, based on the number of students that you have enrolled in your school, our onboarding process will be a bit different. We may offer a few extra tools to a larger school than a smaller school may need. For districts, it's different because we're not only planning and figuring out what the solution ought to be. So it's really customized. Okay. The implementation is customized. The number of people we have to train will be different from the individual school. And there will be definitely some software customization required. We look to simplify the way parents engage, not complicate it. And so figuring out what that looks like for the district is something else that we would be working in. So in that case, it's an implementation fee, if you will.
Okay.
And then a per user student fee or family fee.
Okay. So sounds like when you start talking about those sorts of quote customizations, that can be challenging to handle on the back end, right? To bill and collect. What challenges have you seen there? What are you trying to work through? Again, as you're kind of scaling up, it's easy to start on a spreadsheet, but at some point you need to go to the next phase, right?
Yeah. So we use some tools. Stripe presents some fairly good opportunities there. They've gotten really good tools for even small, early stage startups like ours.
Hmm.
So Stripe has been a very good tool for us. I do think that there are a couple of other platforms that do, um, the revenue-based accounting and finance that we need to help us after that. But it's been fairly easy to do at this stage, right? When we
Yeah.
start onboarding thousands of schools, then I think we're going to be in a different whole different place.
Right. When you're evaluating technology partners, being a technology play yourself, I mean, what do you look for in terms of, all right, there's obviously a need today, but how do you evaluate your future need and if that vendor is going to be a right fit for you long term?
Yeah, it's a really good question because we've had multiple experiences. Well, one thing, I am a very product-centric CEO who's very interested in technology. So while I don't code, I'm very interested in how the technology works. So, um, you know, I'm more concerned about the user experience from the school's perspective and as well from the end user, the parents perspective. And so I may ask you to build may not make sense because maybe it's not efficient, which engineers live on efficiency, right?
Hmm.
Um, but it will be effective, and sometimes it could be competitive, right? So as the CEO, they need to know that when we work together, that I'm going to stay in that lane. I'm going to be, does this make sense for our customer? What are the trade-offs if I want to do this and not make it as efficient as you think it ought to be? And maybe I can present some of those back to customers to get feedback. But they need to know that I'm going to not just be, okay, here's what I'm looking for, go build it and touch base with me later. I'm right along with them. I'm probably going to be, pretty much a pain because I'm very interested in how the technology works and to see what's efficient and what really is going to help us be successful.
Yeah, I certainly feel the same way there. I mean, at the end of the day, the technology underpins it, but the service is very much the technology, right? It's the
Yes,
product that your end customer is interacting with. And so
yes,
if that's not what it needs to be, if you're not intimately involved in that, then you're kind of leaving your end product up to somebody else to decide what it's
yes.
going to be.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I will tell you, when we launched our mobile apps, we had a really good partner, but there were moments and times where they thought like a larger company, and they brought those processes to us, and they just didn't work, right? And so I needed to actually bring in another resource to really audit their process and audit their code essentially to make
Mhm.
sure that it was exactly what I had asked for. Um, and that's a hard conversation to have because if you don't trust us, well, I am writing the check, and so that's where it all matters. So
Yep.
it's not that I don't trust you. I'm writing a check. We've got investors who want us to make good decisions about their investments, and mobile apps are huge today, and their experience has got to be what we have heard from our customers that they want.
Right. And those aren't small checks, right?
Not at all.
Yeah, those
They
are.
are not small checks. They are not small checks. And, you know, um, we we've we've done a couple different things. And at the end of the day, I think that having a technology partner who understands that the technology that you're building is key to our growth from a revenue perspective and our long-term sustainability in the marketplace. And so it's not just technology.
Yeah. So stepping back a bit, I mean, you said you're 6 years into this venture now. Can you just give us a couple flavors for decisions that you made along the way that were either lessons learned or, gosh, that was a foundational decision that I lived with for a long time and I'm really happy with what happened?
Yeah, well, one of the good decisions that I feel like I made pretty early on after our acquisition, we discovered that there was an annual subscription that was the same size, same price, no matter how big your school was. The onboarding fee was exactly the same, no matter how big your school was. And I knew intuitively that's not going to work.
Right.
And being new to the subscription industry, I really wasn't sure, how do you price your product? And, I'm also a lifelong learner and started digging. And we actually hired a growth product leader in the SaaS industry to help think about making the first change in our pricing and then the second change in our pricing. And without that help, I think that we could have gone in a direction that would not have been good for the business, but also maybe not even good for the customer. So I feel like that's one really good decision that I made early on. The technology piece has been a moving target, quite frankly, if I'm honest. When we acquired the platform, the technical lead who had been with the founder from the beginning, fantastic, really, really fantastic, very much. I wish, I could grab him back, but he was in California. I'm in DC. That time zone difference started to really cause a problem. And when she was running the business, she actually is a vice president in her family-owned food specialty business, which is a nationally ranked company. They have product in Wegmans and in Trader Joe's and not Trader Joe's, Harris Teeter and a lot of the big stores. And so she really could not run this platform anymore. So what she was asking of him while she was running her other business was pretty marginal, right? When I took over, I had lots of ideas and I needed more of his time and he didn't have it to give to me. So we made it work for about 18 months. And then I had to make a different decision because he didn't have the time based on his other commitments. And that time zone was really, really affecting us.
Yeah. Well, further to that point, because this is near and dear to me right now, when we prior to COVID had I would say a flexible hybrid environment of an application development team that was mostly on site, but some were remote and some were remote part of the time. And then of course, overnight, like everybody else, we had to go fully virtual and figure out how to make that work. And it's been an interesting evolution from the beginning of, okay, we could just start and do the things we used to do face to face and do them, over Zoom or whatever the case might be. But over time, that kind of kept changing the way the teams were communicating with each other. Everybody was getting Zoom fatigue and things like that, and constantly having to repivot, and just have conversations about how we communicate. I found to be more and more important because it became too easy to just be digital, virtual, and not communicate. So have you seen that same thing, and how have you figured out how to work with your team through the pandemic?
It's been challenging, honestly. Well, first of all, engineers are not Zoom people.
No,
okay, they're not Zoom people. So I want to do Zoom because I want to see you,
right?
And I want to talk through the issues. I want to see your reaction. So I'll do a Zoom call, but they won't have their cameras on. Right. So that's one of the things. And thankfully, they're pretty responsive. They work crazy hours in the middle of the night. I'm up early, so I typically can't get to them until 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. But I think we've worked out a system that is working now, because like them, I thought COVID was maybe a 6-month thing, it's going to be over by the summer. And when it became clear that we were nowhere from being over, I really had to get serious about, okay, well, now how are we really going to do this, right? And so our next move is to bring on a director of product, because we see this as a great opportunity for us. And that means I need to pull away and to be focused more on the sales side, um, and work through some of these opportunities that we have that are fairly large, that, I need to have somebody who's on product and working with our engineering teams.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kimberly, this has been a fantastic conversation. I've loved learning about your business. It's a very unique model in the way that you market it and way you bring on subscribers. Wish you nothing but the best.
Thank
If
you.
our listeners want to get in touch with you or learn more about your business, where can they go?
Yeah, can definitely follow me on Twitter at KY Moore and the number 1. And then look me up on LinkedIn, same thing, KY Moore, and be happy to answer any questions or connect with you. This has been a great opportunity to share our story. We're early stage, and from your other guests, I've learned a lot listening to your other interviews.
Good.
Because it is an evolving business, right? And SaaS in particular, and subscriptions, pricing, and it's an evolving business. And so I'm glad to have had the opportunity to share our story.
I'm always happy to talk about it. I've been doing it for over 15 years, and the way that the businesses worked back then, recurring payments, was night and day different from how it's done today. So it's fun to do these sort of things and talk with people and get different perspectives, and including early stage like yourself. So again, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.